Hello, and this week we are looking at Chapter 5, Motor Carriers. Now, the objectives for this chapter is you need to understand the development of motor carriers and their contributions to the United States economy, be familiar with the different types of firms in the motor carrier industry, and appreciate the market forces shaping the motor carrier industry, gain knowledge of the service characteristics of motor carriers, and identify the types of the vehicles and terminals used in the motor carrier industry. Understand the impacts of fuel and labor on the motor carrier cost structure and be aware of current issues facing the motor carrier industry. So with chapter 5 and on through the other chapters, we are going to actually be focusing on separate sectors of the transportation industry. We'll be looking at motor carriers in chapter 6, we're looking at rails, and in preceding chapters we'll look at ocean freight as well. So this is getting into more specialized sectors within the industry. So some things I want you to think about as you're reading over this chapter this week. The motor carrier industry has played, I think, a major role in the development of the U.S. economy during the 20th century, and it still is continuing on into the 21st century, and I am very sure also into the 22nd century and centuries beyond. But the U.S. has spent estimated cost about 128.9 billion to construct the interstate highway system. And as the interstate system was developed, the motor carriers have steadily replaced railroads in transporting finished and unfinished manufactured products. So by the year 1980, it moved over 1.6 billion tons more to 200 billion tons by motor carriers. And by '06, motor carriers were handling about 10.7 billion tons. So in this chapter, they'll be talking about give you the industry overview, talking about the National Freight Bill. Also, again, they're going to emphasize the significance of motor carriers on the transportation sector. And we're actually going to get into defining this week the TL and what LTL and TL carriers are. So the TL stands for truckload, and less than truckload is that for the LTL carriers. And the truckload carriers, what they do is they provide the service to shippers who tender sufficient volume to meet the minimum weights required for a truckload shipment and truckload rate, or will pay the difference. So the less than truckload carriers, LTL, provide service to shippers who tender shipments lower than the minimum truckload quantities. And sometimes it's also a matter of the number of carriers. The motor carrier industry consists of a large number of small carriers, particularly in the TL segment of the industry. As of the year 2008, a total of 616,187 interstate motor carriers were on file with the Office of Motor Carriers. There is a significant difference, though, between the TL and LTL, and that's both in the terms of number and startup cost, and that growth has happened in the industry. It was primarily in small TL carriers because of the low startup cost, but the LTL segment also requires a network of terminals to consolidate and distribute freight, and that's referred to as a hub and spoke system. So again, with the repeal of the Interstate Commerce Act, the TL segment has been experiencing limited concentration in difference to the LTL. So we're going to talk about the market structure as well when it talks to motor carrier vehicles. You know, you've got your competition, and they're always competing very desperately with each other for freight. And there is a few capital constraints to entry in the motor carrier industry, really. And so it's a small investment combined with freedom of entry and price discounting. I like to share that my brother-in-law, he is actually a small business owner for a logging corporation. So he was wanting to do his own business for many, many years and become a logging operation, have log trucks. And he was able to get into the business after driving for himself for 15 years. And he went and bought one truck. And then from the last 5 years, he has steadily built up his business. He now is running about 6 log trucks. And he's also got a wood cutting operation in the woods as well. So it's amazing. I mean, it is a sizable amount of money that he had to borrow from his bank to be able to do that. But it was very easy for him to do that. Then maybe in any other type of business, it may be a little harder. But also, we do know in our neck of the woods, and sorry for the pun, but that is true in our area, we logging can be a very lucrative business and also be a very expensive business. So again, I agree with what they're saying when I talk about the market structure of freight. Now, operating and service characteristics, there's general service characteristics that motor carriers have. They are the bridge between the pickup and delivery points and the facilities. And when you compare them to other modes of transportation, the smaller cargo, the carrying capacity of the motor carrier vehicle enables the shipper to use the truckload rate or volume discount with a lower volume. So that smaller shipping size of the motor carrier provides the buyer and seller with the benefits of lower inventory. And there's another positive service characteristic is that smoothness of the transport as well. And the equipment, with a high degree of flexibility, there's a relatively smooth ride, and the small carrying capacity of the vehicle are the unique characteristics. So equipment can represent the largest operating asset that a carrier maintains. Say that my brother-in-law with his trucks and his skidders in the woods as well. So even though I would say it is lucrative, there are a lot of costs, and when things break down, you have some issues with your bottom line. But TL carriers need to make two types of equipment decisions. They have to know what type of tractor power and what type of trailer. And the LTL carriers must make the same types of decisions as the TL carriers. And the second decision is they have the decision for power that include the terrain operated through, and trailers include the length and trailer type, which must be made in light of market demands and the type of carrier operation. And they also got to think about their types of vehicles. And there's like motor carrier vehicles or line haul or city, two types, okay? You got the line haul, they haul freight long distances, while city straight trucks are used to provide pickup and delivery. And as you read through the book, they describe more about the line haul, the city straight trucks, and also even special vehicles. Now, the DOT's Federal Motor Safety Carrier Administration has established many rules and regulations governing specifications of motor carrier vehicles. There's terminals. The truckload carriers might not require terminals for movement of freight, but the LTL freight operations do require terminals. And they're used and classified as pickup and delivery, break and bulk, and relay. Then we got the pickup and delivery terminals, and that's called PUD. And it's a key facility in the operation of LTL, hub and spoke system. And then the most common type of terminal found in the LTL system is the PUD terminal. It's a local area that provides direct contact with both shippers and receivers. A pedal run is a route that's driven daily out of the PUD terminal for the purpose of collecting freight. And there's also two elements of a pedal run. One is called stem time, the other is pedal time. Stem time is the time from the driver leaves the terminal until the driver makes the first pickup or delivery, and when the driver makes the last pickup or delivery until returning to that terminal. And the other type is the pedal time, and this is a revenue producing time as it occurs when shipments are handled. And carriers want to maximize the amount of time a driver spends performing these activities. And we got the break bulk terminals, and that's in a hub and spoke system for LTL. And it provides an intermediate point where freight with common destinations from PUD terminals is combined in single trailer movement for delivering in the PUD terminal. And the relay terminals are necessitated by the maximum hours of service regulation that's imposed on drivers. And there's also terminal management decisions. You got to think about the number of terminals and the location of those terminals as well. As we go from the market structure, equipment decisions, we now look at cost structure. And we got the fixed versus variable cost components. You've got labor, and there's also the Federal Motor Carriers Association's driving time regulations. Drivers have to drive a maximum of 11 hours after being off duty for 10 consecutive hours. A driver is permitted to be on duty a maximum of 14 hours after 10 consecutive hours off duty. And then no driver can drive after accumulating 60 hours on duty in 7 consecutive days. That's amazing. I have had friends in the industry, family members that yes, it is the drive time is very well close monitored. Then you've got the fuel cost, and carriers can have actually experienced, and this is probably as of 2012 when this book was written, 426% increase in diesel fuel prices from 1976 to 07, and it's 53 cents per gallon in 1976. And now it's about $2.79 per gallon in 2007. So it has increased, I think, even by $1 and some change, maybe even a couple of dollars and some change since then. Then we've got the economies of scale that's in the cost structure. But there's not a major economies of scales for the large-scale motor carrier operations, but the concentration of the LTL business is indicative of the economies of operation in the segment. And so certain economies exist in a greater use in indivisible inputs, such as your terminals, your management specialists, and information systems. Then you've got your operating ratio, and that operating ratio measures the percent of operating expenses to operating revenue. Then as we look at funding, we see that highway users pay for the construction, maintenance, and policies of highway through highway user taxes. And the federal and state government assess highway user taxes that are paid into the Federal Highway Trust Fund, and that's 90% of the construction costs for the interstate system, and over 50% of the construction costs for all the federal aid roads. So with motor carriers, you're also going to look at safety. And of course, driver's hours of service and fatigue are two areas of concern. If you read any news story across the nation, any town, any city, interstate system, you know there's always going to be some type of motor carrier or a truck crash. And it can be due to several different things like fatigue or the truck is not safe. And that's why, there's federal DOT inspections, but sometimes some companies still get around that at times. And it not only is a danger to the driver, but to those that are on the road with him or her. Our technology is also a current issue. And now that we got GPS, that's something that truck drivers have advantage of now. And they track the vehicles. The companies can track, the dispatchers can track, if they made it to point A to point B and where they're at. And then we've got the LTO rates in relation to technology. So the LTO has used discounts from published tariffs as a means of pricing segments to attract traffic of large shippers. And then the Interstate Commerce Commission was actually eliminated, and for all practical purposes, LTO rates are subject to the free market environment now. And a shipper has more choices for LTO than existed during the height of regulation. Then we've got our financial stability, and that's another major concern for the motor carrier industry. And so, as of 2007, again, a total of 1,985 motor carrier firms failed, and those had at least 5 vehicles. So sometimes overcapacity has been a severe problem, and shippers have also become increasingly cognizant of the failure rate among motor carriers, and they have induced a financial evaluation of carriers into their overall decision framework. And as we go back to introduction to supply chain, talk about our suppliers being rating systems. I mean, all that is built into this, even to the transportation sector. So as you read this chapter, I find this is a very interesting chapter, not because of my personal connection, but because of how, when you go down the interstate, you drive any interstate system in our state, in our local towns, you are seeing the supply chain in action. So have a wonderful week, and I will speak with you all soon. Thank you.